And going back to the firefighting example, I think that's really fascinating in the sense that it is forced focus, that it literally cannot focus on anything else but on the fire. So, and I think that links to the notion of the book, The One Thing, because a hallmark of being a leader is that your time is being demanded by a million people. Like you have a lot of messages, a lot of meetings, a lot of asks. So it's really hard to have have more sort of the maker time. So and speak on that, how do you intentionally to create more or protect your maker time as a leader? Because I feel that ties directly to the flow state.
I think the the maker moniker in there is really fascinating to me. And again, deconstructing this on the fly. So, like, let's see how this goes. But one of the biggest challenges, certainly that I've had personally through the whole period of the growth of this organization, is the feeling that, or maybe not the feeling, but the definition of maker, right? Like, what is it that I make, and how, can I carve out time to do that, right? And you know, one of the I'm well past this point, I think, but one of the classic struggles that CTOs always have is like, how much do I still code, right? And like, sure, I mean, I could probably go write some lines of code in one of our systems and the PR would get rejected. Like, that would not be a good use of it. I could carve out time to do that, right? That wouldn't necessarily be a good use of time. Um, so then what does that look like? Like, what's a product that you can create that is that's helpful or high leverage, or whatever that might be. And that could be anything from um, clearly articulated statements about direction or context, like things that actually move for a lot of people. And I will say, there was a period, unfortunately it didn't last, but for about half a year, I crafted email messages to much of the organization just to give extra like, hey, this is what's going on this week, this is what I'm seeing, here's how you can take that and think about it in your space. Like, not details of how we're doing things, but just here's what you need to know about this part of our business that might help you do your job better, right? And uh, that maybe that was like a little bit of that maker. Like, I can sit here and write an email and I enjoy writing, right? Which is not necessarily true of all engineering leaders. I enjoy writing, and so I've produced something, but it's like probably more valuable than code that I could write for that same amount of time. Although oddly, I think I'm more fussy about my English writing than I am about my code writing, which is, I don't know, says something. Um, so that sense that, like, I can create, yes, but what is it that I create that's of high value? And so, and that, even that example is still a single person product, right? Versus, do I have the opportunity to grow, mentor, coach? I don't actually love most of those words because I feel like it's more balanced than that. They sound very one directional, but I typically learn more than I teach, I think, in most of those conversations. But can I enable people to do their jobs more effectively, again, by providing context or understanding or additional framing, or whether it's, here's how you can structure this in a way that it will be more valuable to the rest of the organization, it will be received better, or just take into account this other thing that's happening because that will give you an opportunity to do this more easily. Like, those sorts of things, helping people see more, right? It's not sitting here like headset on, listening to music and cranking out code, but it feels productive, right? It's also not a status meeting, right? It's not just ingesting information about what other people have done and then leaving, right? Which doesn't that's I've never felt a state of flow around listening to other people tell me numbers that I could have read, right? So I do think, it shifts, and we keep throwing this word around, but it's really about, how do I feel like I'm generating momentum, and how do I feel some sense of feedback around that says, "Yep, this is working well. I'm going to keep doing more of that." It's engaging, and it feels like I'm sort of doing something that's fulfilling to me and valuable to the organization.
I love that email example you just provided. That's really inspiring. That's a a way to spend your time that can as an outlet for your creativity, but has a much different and probably bigger impact on organization than writing code. So I feels like the being intentional to find time like that to where you can focus, you can get into a single player mode to create, but in different form than code. That's one way to find flow in engineering management. So really like the example. And another way, people need to balance sort of finding the time, the focus, the flow state is that the level of challenge. Uh, if it's too no challenge, you feel bored. If it's too challenged, you feel stressed. So, any insights you can share on that? How do you at least ways you attempt to find those balances?
That's a really fascinating question because I think that one of the things that happens, whether you want it to or not, at a certain level of leadership is the certainly the level of ambiguity is extremely high, right? And so when I think about what challenges folks like as they grow in their own careers, that's typically one of the kind of key dimensions that I would think about. Like, what is your ability to handle a level of ambiguity, right? Like, am I handing you a very specific task? Or am I giving you basically an open space and saying, I think there might be a problem over there, right? Like those are pretty different in terms of your growth and sort of like the size issue. Like at a CTO level, you don't get a lot of choice in how much ambiguity you're going to be facing, right? It's like if I turn around and say I can't handle this, then I'm out shopping for a new CTO. Like it's so I don't get a lot of option, I guess. And so I talked about like compensation frameworks earlier. I keep saying frameworks. I love that word now. Um, and I think it probably balances out in other ways. So I'm not really answering your question directly, but it's sort of like, well, this is the level of challenge that I have to operate at. So how do I dial the rest of my life for my own personal balance, right? Like it feels analogous to decision fatigue. Like there's this classic example of um, Steve Jobs wearing a black turtleneck every day, right? Or I think Barack Obama just had one suit. I mean, I'm probably totally misquoting these things because they have to think so much, or in Steve's case, have to think so much, make so many decisions all day long that just like anything that they can sort of clear off their plate is valuable. So I wonder if there's something like that from a challenge perspective. I meter that a little bit differently and just try to find ways that I can do things that are challenging, but not necessarily thinking in the same way. I mean, keep talking about guitars, like creative outlets that are just very different in the use of my brain, right? So my brain is overly taxed on a particular type of challenge. Can I do oddly I pick activities that are really frustrating, like playing guitar frustrates me because I want to be better at that too, right? But it's just a different kind of mode, and being able to shift modes maybe brings me balance. I feel like I'm totally not answering the question, but that's how I think about the challenge, because again, I'm not sure that you can say I'm not going to accept this challenge. It's too hard for me. You might say, I have an executive team and I may be titled the CTO, but these people are all really smart. So, how am I going to get everyone to help me? And I think that's one of the biggest transitions that good executive teams go through is realizing, wait a second, your title is CTO and mine is CRO or CMO or whatever, but we are the team that needs to solve this problem. So if there's something I can do to help you, because just in the case of marketing or revenue, like I know a lot about the customer as I described, because in their case, they know a lot about being very numbers driven, right? Like marketing and revenue are very, very analytical organizations. They're very good at that sort of thing. How can we take some of those tools and apply them to other parts of the business, right? Or is there something we can learn from that? So everybody has something to share. Not saying we're not going to solve this problem because it's too hard, or I'm going to like level. There's no one up to go, right? Like your CEO is probably really busy, but can we as a team work more tightly, be open about the fact that we don't necessarily have all the answers, work on it together, get outside help, whatever that might be.